To be honest, I did not expect much from the new HBO show House of the Dragon, which is a prequel/spin-off to Game of Thrones and based on the George Martin's book Fire and Blood. I've read A Song of Ice and Fire, all 5 books, but unfortunately I haven't read Fire and Blood. So I cannot really compare the TV show to the original. I just wanna talk about my own impressions and my own feelings after watching 2 episodes of House of the Dragon. I love Game of Thrones. I watched the whole show 3 times, but I wasn't really looking forward to watching House of the Dragon for basically 2 reasons. The first reason is that the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones were pretty terrible. Okay, season 7 was tolerable, but season 8 was just awful. And the second reason is that it's been it's been already 3 years since the release of Game of Thrones finale. So I kinda moved on. But after the first positive reviews about House of the Dragon, I decided to give the show a chance, and I wasn't disappointed at all. What ruined Game of Thrones was the lack of source material. The first 4 seasons, based on the books, is the best the television ever created, in my opinion. Season 5 and 6 were also pretty good because they were based on some unfinished storylines from the original book series. But then the showrunners completely ran out of any source material and basically wrote everything themselves. And we all saw the result. And now the situation is different because the original story Fire and Blood is finished by George Martin. Unlike A Song of Ice and Fire, which he'll probably never finish. I don't think he even wants to finish anymore. But enough about Game of Thrones. The first 2 episodes of House of the Dragon were great. The thing that I liked most was writing and characters dynamic. Seriously, watching the relationship between the characters was very interesting. The highlight of these episodes to me was Daemon Targaryen, played by Matt Smith. His relationships with King Viserys and Princess Rhaenyra, the impressions that he makes as a character. He honestly reminded me of Jaime Lannister, to a certain degree, of course. In the first episode, he makes an impression of an unsympathetic character who only cares about himself and about becoming the next king of the Seven Kingdoms. He is cruel, he is ignorant, and he thinks he is better than the others, being the exact opposite of his brother, King Viserys, who makes an impression of a wise and merciful ruler. Honestly, something we haven't seen in Game of Thrones. But in the second episode, we see Daemon from the other side. We see a rebel who doesn't want to obey to the old rules and traditions. He rejected the wife that the council found for him. He wants to marry someone he truly cares for. And he doesn't care much about what others might think about him. He is too impulsive to become a king, doesn't value diplomacy much, but he seems like a person whose heart is in the right place. After all, in spite of all rules, he is ready to marry a Baratheon girl, while his brother is forced to marry a 12-year-old girl. Because he needs sons and Rhaenyra girl cannot become a queen of Westeros, even though Viserys himself named her his heir. But he just can't go against the old customs. He basically does what the council tells him to do. And this is the big difference between the two brothers. They're both victims of the circumstances, in their own ways. But my favorite character isn't even Daemon, but Rhaenyra. I find many similarities between these two characters. She doesn't want to obey the rules and traditions either, just like her uncle. She wants to be the first queen, even if the whole Westeros is against it. And that makes her an inspiring character. The characters are the highlights, are the main focus of the show, not CGI and dragons. even though CGI is pretty good, honestly, even though we haven't seen dragons much. It's a character-driven history drama wrapped in fantasy shell, just like Game of Thrones, basically. As I mentioned previously, CGI in the show is pretty decent, and dragons look pretty decent, especially for the TV show, even if budget is $200 million, stretched over 11 hours of content. I won't say much about costumes and decorations because it looks good and authentic, and I have nothing to complain about. Mild disappointed was that despite having Ramin Djawadi as a composer, they decided to reuse Game of Thrones opening music for House of the Dragon opening instead of writing new music. But that's just my opinion. Ramin Djawadi should have written a new theme for the show. Though I won't deny hearing Game of Thrones theme made me indulge in nostalgia. In conclusion, I would say that House of the Dragon is great so far. I really enjoyed the first two episodes. It caught my attention just 15 minutes after the beginning, and I haven't felt bored for a second in 2 hours. If the rest of the first season is as great as the beginning, I think we're getting pretty great show. As a fan of Game of Thrones show, as well as George Martin's book series, I'm really glad that House of the Dragon is good, and I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the season.